Today we're talking about a very cool Pokemon, and that is Toxtricity. And what makes it cool? Well, it has the unique typing of electric and poison, and outside of the glaring 4 times weakness to ground type attacks, Toxtricity's electric poison dual typing is actually really phenomenal defensively. It only has one other weakness outside of the ground typing, and that is to psychic type attacks. And then as far as its resistances go, it resists 8 different types, which is just wonderful. And these types here are flying, bug, electric, grass, fairy, poison, fighting, and steel, all of which are fairly common types. Now, the one drawback to Toxtricity, though, is it is a bit on the glacier side, but if you're going up against the Toxtricity and it's going to give you some trouble, just know it is kind of on the glassy side, so if your opponent doesn't get screens up, you should be okay with dealing with this thing. And if you're looking to use Toxtricity, just remember, this thing is glassy, so you might want to invest in some screen support yourself, or maybe a little bit of bulk just to try to keep it around. And also, Tera might be a really good idea defensively as opposed to offensively for this particular Pokemon. Now, let's jump into Showdown and get the guest of honor, or rather the spotlight of honor, on the screen here. So here we go. We got the amped up form of Toxtricity. This thing technically has 2 different forms, the amped up form and the low key form. But honestly, as far as differences go, there's not a whole lot of differences between the 2 different Pokemon. And the most notable is the fact that one has a slightly different ability than the other. So the amped up form of Toxtricity has the abilities of Punk Rock Plus and Technician, while the low key form has the abilities of Punk Rock Minus and Technician. Now, on the note of plus and minus, both abilities are fairly gimmicky and kind of rely on having either Pokemon with the same ability or the opposite ability on the field at the same time, and that basically gives them a 50% boost to their special attack. Now, you don't really see a whole lot of plus and minus strategies out there, and usually when you do, they do tend to be relatively gimmicky, so they're not very consistent, but there are a few different moves that do rely around plus and minus, so you could potentially build something to have some fun to troll people with. Don't get me wrong, it is kind of funny, but you're probably going to be seeing either Technician or Punk Rock on Toxtricity, and specifically out of those 2, you're probably going to be seeing Punk Rock. So Technician here, the hidden ability, gives the power of moves that are 60 and lower a 50% boost. So it boosts up the weaker moves to make them do a little bit more damage, and normally Technician is a really good ability, but Punk Rock is just so much better in my opinion. So basically what Punk Rock does is the Pokemon with the ability receives half the damage from incoming sound-based moves, while being able to boost up their own sound-based moves by a 30% boost in power. So basically, they take reduced damage from sound-type attacks, and they boost up sound-type attacks, and Toxtricity does get a good amount of sound-based moves in its arsenal. Now, as far as its stats go here, we have base 75 HP, 98 attack, 70 in both of its defenses, 114 special attack, and 75 speed. Now, 75 speed is fairly nice because depending on how you invest in this thing can be an absolute monster in Tailwind or even with a choice Scarf. And also the 114 special attack is really nice too, because you can slap a choice specs on it to get more out of that special attack stat, or even a life orb, or even a throat spray, because the throat spray item is a item that activates when you go for a sound-based move, and it raises your special attack 1 stage, and this thing has more than its fair share of sound-based moves in its arsenal, so it'll be very easy to get a throat spray boost off. Now, I have a choice specs specifically here so that Toxtricity can go full offensive, but you could remove it for a life orb so that you could run Protect instead. So let's talk about some Tera types. And honestly, I think a defensive Tera is going to be really nice for this thing, and Tera Grass is going to be really, really handy since it will turn that 4 times ground type weakness into a resistance. Honestly, I'm personally of the opinion that Ursaluna Blood Moon is going to be a massive threat in Regulation H, and seeing as ground is one of its two stab type options, I would definitely like to be able to try to keep Toxtricity around and have that Tera Grass to resist a potential Earth power. And plus, ground is just a really good offensive typing to begin with, so being able to resist that is definitely nice. Now, you could technically run Tera flying on Toxtricity instead, and then that way you just have a straight up immunity to ground type attacks. So a little bit of food for thought for some defensive Teras right there. And as far as offensive Teras go, you could go Tera Normal, Tera Electric, or Tera Poison. Had to think for a quick second there. But anyways, Tera Normal, Tera Electric, and Tera Poison could be really nice. You can double up on your stab modifier with Tera Electric or Tera Poison. And Tera Normal can give you stab for normal type attacks. So let's talk about the attacks that Toxtricity gets. It has a signature move in the form of Overdrive, which is an electric type sound-based move. It has the base power of 80, which means it's also on par with a Discharge, but it also gets to benefit from Punk Rock, meaning it actually gets a 30% boost in power. So before you even apply stab or even a choice specs boost, this thing is already going to be over a base 100 power move right there. Now, in double battles, spread moves do have a little bit reduced damage output, but the Punk Rock does cancel that out, which is going to be very, very nice right there, because you're effectively going at a maximum of 75% power in a spread move situation. In double battles, the Punk Rock's giving you a 30% boost. So the drop and the boost kind of balance each other out in that sense. And as far as normal type options go, Toxtricity gets access to Boom Burst. Boom Burst is a base 140 normal type sound move right here. So it also benefits from Punk Rock. And the nice thing here too is it has a higher base power than Hyper Voice to begin with. Now, the one drawback to Boom Burst is it will hit your partner. So you got to be a little bit careful. You might want to run Tera Ghost on something, or just a straight up Ghost type next to Toxtricity, or just click Protect to make sure that you don't hit yourself with your own Boom Burst. But Boom Burst just has so much more explosive power than Hyper Voice, so it is definitely worth looking into, and even worth looking into going for Tera Normal to give it stab as well. And then post DLC, Toxtricity got access to Psychic Noise. Now this is a base 75 Psychic type attack, and it's kind of nice to have Psychic type coverage on a Poison type Pokemon, since you can kind of threaten some other Poison type Pokemon with it for some super effective damage. And Psychic Noise also has the effect of preventing your opponent from healing for 2 turns afterwards, and that stops the likes of, say, like Drain Punch or Giga Drain as well. So if you're dealing with a fighting type Pokemon that likes to run Drain Punch, or their only stab fighting option is Drain Punch, well, you effectively lock them out of that, and no more HP for them for 2 turns, so that could be relatively nice. And plus, if you're going up against something that, say, has like the Leftovers or Black Sledge items, which normally give you back a little bit of HP at the end of the turn, or even a berry for that matter, well, they won't get the HP back for those 2 turns, which could be really nice for disrupting your opponent's momentum right there. So Psychic Noise could be really nice right here. And then Toxtricity has Sludge Bomb as its poison type option. Now, you could technically pull this out for Sludge Wave, but I like the idea of having the single target Sludge Bomb on Toxtricity, and then you don't have to worry about posing Wide Guard. And the main reason why I make that note here too is because Overdrive and Boom Burst are both spread moves. Wide Guard could negate both of them right there, so it would be kind of nice to have the Sludge Bomb as opposed to the Sludge Wave, so that you're not strictly relying on Psychic Noise if you know your opponent has Wide Guard for that matter. Now, you technically could run the Sludge Wave, don't get me wrong, but you might want to change out one of your other moves. And this is mostly just for a pure offensive choice specs idea. If you wanted to drop one of these moves as well, I would probably actually recommend the Psychic Noise being dropped for Protect if you wanted to run a Life Orb instead. And then that way too, you could have Protect and you can change between your moves, and Life Orb would give you a boost in power to your moves. Not quite as much as a choice specs, but fairly comparable amount for that matter. Now let's talk about the EVs here on this particular spread. What I was initially thinking was we could experiment and see where Toxtricity can go. We could go full max investment into the special attack and speed, or we could try to run a little bit of bulk. Maybe we're running a Grimmsnarl next to Toxtricity. Maybe we have that screen support from it, or maybe we're running an Incineroar and relying on Intimidate and Fake Out to just try to disrupt our opponent as well. So I was thinking we could go 116 EVs into the special attack to bring us up to 149, and with a choice specs boosting up that 149, we're still hitting a very respectable number right here. Since we're getting a 50% boost to that 149, we are actually going to be looking at a base stat total of a final stat total of 223. Factoring in that 50% boost. So that's fairly respectable even without the max investment. And this way we can run more speed into Toxtricity so that we can also benefit from Tailwind as well. So we do have that in our back pocket. Now, another thing too, if you wanted to, is you could also run the move Volt Switch instead. Like maybe instead of, say, Psychic Noise here, we run Volt Switch, and now Toxtricity has a pivoting option out. So we could potentially do that, but honestly, I think that might be a little bit better if you ran a Choice Scarf, and then that way too, Toxtricity can always reset its moves if it's in a less than favorable matchup for that matter. Now, you could definitely run a Choice Scarf. I think Choice Scarf could be a really strong option as well, but I think Choice Specs is going to be great for getting as much damage as possible with this thing. So as far as the rest of the EVs go, we have an extra point into our defenses there. It's not really going to be doing much in the long run, but it's just to give us a little extra benefit right here. So we're going to go up from 90 to 91 with the extra point into our defense and our special defense. We have max speed investment so that we hit 139, and when you double that with Tailwind, you're looking at 278 roughly. So right there, you are incredibly fast. You're outspeeding Electrode, which is the fastest Pokemon in the game. You're going to be outspeeding a lot of Pokemon. So 139 is a little bit wild when you think about it, because that's 278 right there, and a Electro, which is base 150, is capping out at 222. But just so you know, like, this means you're going to be outspeeding some choice Scarf Pokemon as well, so that's going to be relatively nice to have in your back pocket. And then as far as the HP investment goes, we have 132 EVs to bring it up to 167. So like I said, having some Intimidate support from Incineroar could be nice, or even Grimmsnarl with screens. You might give your Toxtricity more of a fighting chance to be able to take a hit right there, and having the Tera Grass can definitely help for keeping you around and not having to worry about ground type attacks. And the other nice thing too is if you want to run a Rillaboom next to Toxtricity, well, Grassy Terrain actually weakens the power of both Bulldoze and Earthquake, so you don't have to worry about them hitting you for full power. And on top of that, there are both spread moves too, so they'll get reduced in power significantly. And if you do have that Tera Grass right there, well, now you're sitting pretty and not having to worry about that. Now, Toxtricity gets some nice support options as well. So right here, I just brought up a few moves that it does get that can be really nice to support you. So Toxtricity does get access to Eerie Impulse, which lowers the target's special attack 2 stages, which means you can keep opposing special attackers in line, especially if you have a few different Intimidators on your team to keep the physical attackers in check. And plus, you're likely going to see a Clear Amulet more likely on a physical attacker than a special attacker, so you should be safe to lower something's special attack with the Eerie Impulse. Now, alternatively too, instead of Eerie Impulse, Toxtricity does get access to the move Noble Roar, which is a sound move that lowers the target's attack and special attack 1 stage. It's basically Parting Shot without the pivot built into it, so it does get access to that, which could be some nice support. Now, it gets Helping Hand as well, and this way too, Toxtricity doesn't necessarily have to be the main damage dealer on the team. Toxtricity could show up, and if it knows it's not going to be outspeeding the opponent, but maybe its partner will, you can go for the Helping Hand, take advantage of that +5 priority on Helping Hand to boost up your partner's damaging move by 50%, and maybe they get the knockout instead. So just a little bit of food for thought. And then as far as some more disruption goes, we have access to Metal Sound. Metal Sound here is another sound move that also lowers the target's special defense 2 stages, which means you can really soften them up for either Toxtricity itself or a partner Pokemon right there with Metal Sound. And alternatively too, Toxtricity does get the physical variant of this in the form of Screech. So Toxtricity could lower the target's physical defense 2 stages. Now, the one drawback to both Metal Sound and Screech is they do have 85 accuracy, so you could potentially miss. So you might think you're going for the nice knockout by softening up the opponent, and you might just miss instead. So you just got to be a little bit weary of those 85 accuracy moves. You could technically still run them, don't get me wrong. I think they are really nice options, but they could potentially miss. If it's not 100, it might as well be 0 in my book. So there is that. And on top of that, a nice alternative to Metal Sound is Toxtricity also gets the move Acid Spray. So Acid Spray does do damage on top of lowering the target's special defense 2 stages right there. So this is also a technician move too, so Acid Spray would technically benefit from that as well. But the main idea here is you could do a little bit of chip, potentially break a Focus Sash while doing said chip damage and softening up the target for Toxtricity's partner. Now, because Toxtricity's speed is only base 75, unless you have a slower Pokemon that's winding up, or maybe you have Trick Room, Acid Spray is going to be a little bit risky as well, because Toxtricity might get outsped by some Pokemon if you don't have Tailwind up on the field. So just use that with a little bit of caution. But on the note of speed, Toxtricity does get access to Thunder Wave, which is nice, so you can get some paralysis off into the opponents, and similar to how you can break a Focus Sash with Acid Spray while also getting the benefits of lowering their special defense, you can technically do the same with spreading paralysis with the move Nuzzle. Nuzzle is a very weak physical move here, but it is a guaranteed paralysis right there. So you can potentially break a Focus Sash so long as your opponent doesn't have leftovers or grassy terrain helping them up. You break that sash, you whiff the Nuzzle, you get a little bit of chip, and now they're paralyzed. That could be fun as well. And finally, let's talk about one more thing about Toxtricity, and that is Shift Gear. Shift Gear is essentially a better variant of Dragon Dance, because Dragon Dance normally raises your attack and speed both 1 stage. Shift Gear raises your speed 2 stages while giving you an attack boost. Now, Toxtricity is honestly more a special attacker than a physical attacker, but it does get some physical moves. And honestly, the fact that Toxtricity has a means of raising its speed 2 stages means you could just look at that for the sake of raising its speed, and then you could run, say Boom Burst and Overdrive and Protect as some options right there, or you could potentially even look into running some physical moves as well to take advantage of the fact that you are raising your attack 1 stage, because you do have that 98 attack stat right here. So that base 98 isn't necessarily the worst thing imaginable if you do have Shift Gear, because you are going to be raising your attack 1 stage, and without any investment you're sitting at 118 on a neutral nature for your physical attack stat. So when you think about that, 118 boosted up by a 50% modifier is going to bring us up to 177 right there. So that's going to be nice and hard hitting once you get that Shift Gear. So yeah, once you get that Shift Gear off, you're going to be hitting incredibly hard. So let's take a quick look at what Toxtricity gets for some physical moves. And also, just to point this out too, if you raise your investment just a little bit, like you put less than 100 EVs, you also hit 130 right there, there's an extra 65 points for that initial 50% boost, so you can hit 195, which is fairly respectable too. So as far as some physical options go, if you wanted to, we could see the likes of, say, maybe Brick Break to destroy opposing screens, or Drain Punch for some sustainability. Now, if Toxtricity had some bulkier stats, I would definitely say consider running Drain Punch and Shift Gear together, but because Toxtricity's defenses are so low, maybe not the best. But here's the spicy idea too. If you wanted to, you could put a Focus Sash on Toxtricity. You get that Shift Gear up, and then from there, you go for Endeavor. We could turn Toxtricity's glassy stats into a unexpected strength because you're likely going to have your HP lowered drastically by taking a hard-hitting move. Toxtricity survives with a Focus Sash. They get the speed off with Shift Gear. They go Endeavor next turn. Endeavor makes it so that the target's HP matches the user's. So if you're down to 1 HP and your opponent has something really bulky on the field or something that just set up, like, I don't know, like say maybe Tatsugiri Dondozo, and they're not running Tera Ghost, you run that Endeavor, you hit them and bring them down to 1 HP, great. They're going to be very easy pickings right there. So Toxtricity could be really scary for your opponent if you get them with that surprise Endeavor. As far as some other physical moves go here, we get Fire Punch, which is some nice fire type coverage to hit steel types because they would otherwise resist our, or rather they'd be outright immune to our poison type attacks. We get Gunk Shot, which is a stab base 120 physical poison type move. So that's probably going to be Toxtricity's hardest hitting physical option right there for a shift gear set. We get Poison Jab, which is slightly less power here at 80 power, but it's more reliable with that 100 accuracy as opposed to Gunk Shot's 80 accuracy. So that could be a nice option. We get Trailblaze as well, which could further be used to boost up our speed while doing a little bit of chip damage to our opponent. And we also have Thunder Punch and Wild Charge for electric type physical stab options, with Thunder Punch being a 75 power move with relatively no drawback, whereas Wild Charge does have a quarter recoil of the damage caused. So Wild Charge hits harder, but it is a little bit riskier there. So you do have those options at your disposal for a physical option on Toxtricity. But like I said too, even the fact that you're just raising your speed 2 stages means you could just play around, like say Overdrive and Boom Burst, or even Overdrive Sledge Bomb, something like that, and Protect, just to benefit from the speed. But honestly, if you're going to be raising your attack stat, you might as well consider running a physical move too, just to benefit from it. It's not like you're at like a base 60 attack. You're at 98 and your special attack is 114. So that's only 16 points difference at the end of the day. So it's worth looking into. So anyways, that's my main thoughts on the guitar playing frog, reptile, lizard, whatever this thing is. Let me know what you think of it down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.